Good evening and welcome to Gunner Shot. Sat Sri Akal, Vanakkam and Jai Hind. Today we're going to do a review of China's faltering economy. And to carry out this review, we have with us Dr. Christina Chen from INDSR, Taiwan. So on behalf of all of us, I'd like to first welcome Dr. Christina once again on Gunner Shot. Madam, thanks a lot for joining in from Taiwan. It's an honor that you're able to join in with us.
Good evening, General Shankar. Thank you for asking again to be here, and good evening to all of you.
Right. We all know, that the Chinese economy has been, faltering and they've been hitting new lows every day. High
Yeah.
unemployment and, the manufacturing is down, exports are down, imports are down. Um, and a lot of internal issues, a lot of layoffs, salary cuts, everything. We've been tracking this quite keenly within India, and I've been writing on it and I've been speaking on it also. But then we have one view, okay? And there's a requirement for us to understand your view because Taiwan and China have uh, greater equations with each other,
Yeah.
and you're more connected. You're
Mhm.
more connected economically also than China with than India and China. And a lot of your businesses are invested in China, which is
Yes.
not the case with us, right? And now with this faltering economy, there are issues, with the political side of it also. And unless you understand this faltering economy, we will not be able to, navigate the problems ahead with China. And what's more, the problem with China is that this faltering economy might force China and Xi Jinping to externalize. And to some extent, they've already done the first shot of that by issuing out a new standard map,
Yeah.
which takes in a lot of other territory and rights, and the South China Sea, and the 9 dash line has become a 10 dash line all of a sudden. So there
Yes.
are issues. So if this faltering economy continues for some more time, we're going to have repercussions.
Hmm.
And so all this in mind, I thought, we'd welcome you and give us an idea, and then we'll discuss. Okay, is it going to recover? Not going to recover? What are the after effects of all this? We'll do that. But first, your presentation, and it's all yours. Take it on.
All right. Thank you. I thank you, General, and yes, as you pointed out that I think everyone has been following this issue about the Chinese economic development very closely because China is a huge country and it is a big player, and so its economy will definitely have impact on global economy and even global security. And you correctly pointed out that right now, I think there's no doubt that as of now, the Chinese economy is not doing well. It is faltering. And many analysts have already pointed out that, and some even began to kind of speculate about the future of Chinese economy, wondering if the Chinese economy will have this long-term, recession, will experience this long-term stagnation. Some even wonder if it's going to be following Japan's footstep. Remembering the 1990s Japan experience. So I'm going to just to add to that discussion with a little of my own point of view. So just to begin, and could you turn on the presentation? Yes. Next slide, please. I think it is no doubt, as I said, it is no doubt that currently the Chinese economy is faltering, and this is somewhat unexpected for many people because many people thought that Yes, I mean, because we were in this global pandemic for almost 3 years, 3 years or so. We've been in this situation for a while, and that definitely had negative impact on global economy. China, no doubt, was part of that, and so people felt that as China kind of Chinese pandemic ended, we will be seeing the Chinese economy to have this rebound. So that was the expectation. However, after China, after the white paper movement, Chinese authorities announced this lift of the zero COVID policy. So that kind of marked the end of China's very strict control over the pandemic. But yeah, according to the data, it showed slight improvement, slight rebound. But as you can tell from these GDP growth data, yeah, I mean, overall, we're seeing the GDP growth kind of faltering. So this is a graph that shows the trend of GDP growth from 2020 to 2023. We see that, I mean, in the initial stage of the COVID pandemic, the Chinese economy had this somewhat of a slight spike in, I guess, quarter two of 2020, and that reflected um, the rest of the world was hit by the pandemic, while China was like, it was like the first country, so it kind of had that spike. But then after that spike, we saw this decline, and this overall decline, and in the most recent quarter, 2023, we see that the GDP growth hasn't really gone up. So that shows, just based on this, this data, it shows that the Chinese economy is faltering, it's not doing well, and some people even believe that because in the previous two sessions, the Chinese government, the premier, announced that they announced this target of 5% GDP growth for the rest of the year, which was considered very modest. But I think many people, I wouldn't say most, but many people began to believe that the for the rest of the year, the GDP growth would not exceed 5%. Next, please. So just a little, indicators showing that while the overall GDP growth is not improving, if we look at more specific measures, some of them are so-called drivers or the pillars of Chinese economic growth. We see those indicators also showing this faltering trend. If we look at exports, we see that exports, yes, the black dash line stands for 2023. So on the right hand side of 2020, the black dash line stands for the trend after 2023. So we see that export also, showing this decline, and that suggests that global, on the global scale, the demands has weakened. So even after COVID, the global demand for exports, for Chinese exports, hasn't really picked up yet. And not to mention the domestic Chinese economy situation. So exports, we see this decline hasn't really gone up. We will see CPI, the Consumer Price Index, also showing this decline. And CPI is a indicator for consumer confidence. So that says something about the Chinese people. They don't feel confident even after COVID, and it's happened. During the that dip occurred when the Chinese authorities engaged in very strict lockdowns. Notably, the lockdown happened in Shanghai, the 2 months lockdown. So that reflected this low consumer confidence in the Chinese market. They were not confident, so they were not pulling out the money from their pockets to buy things. That's the CPI. And then something that I think General also pointed out earlier, that youth unemployment, something that is very, very serious, a serious issue in China today, and something that has been bugging the Chinese government, the CCP, for now. And the latest stat says that youth unemployment has surpassed 20%. So it reached like around 21%. And that is the official statistics. So 21% was the data reported by the authorities. There's a university professor in China. I think he's from Beida, and he calculated the youth unemployment. He said the real youth unemployment is about double of 21%. So it's around 46. According to his calculation, the youth unemployment rate is about 46%. That's extremely high. So it's so severe to the point that the Chinese authorities announced that they will no longer release the data on youth unemployment. So they just suspended the publication of such figures. So that also is an indication that they know that it's so serious. That they refuse to show the situation to the outside world. When we look at new loans, it shows this dip after 2023, also indication that the people in China are not borrowing. They're kind of conservative now. And then yuan, when we look at the Chinese currency, it's weakened versus the US dollar. So showing that, again, low confidence in the Chinese market. So those indicators, exports, CPI, unemployment, new loans, and the Chinese currency, they all look not so good. They all look that supports the previous graph, which is that overall the economy is faltering. It's not improving, and some people believe that it's not going to improve in the near future. Next slide, please. Okay, so why is this economic stagnation happening? I mean, why, despite the expectation that we're going to see a rebound in the Chinese economic performance after COVID, we see the reverse trend happening. And there's a couple of factors, couple of reasons that I gather from the current analyses. One is that it's about structure. It's something that China will definitely encounter due to its developmental status. So this is the so-called middle income trap, saying that it's an economic theory, saying that China is a developing country, and as a developing country, usually the developing countries will pursue this export-oriented, low, focusing on the labor-intensive manufacturing path. And China is no exception. So China adopted this, strategy of export-oriented, focusing on the labor-intensive manufacturing, and that helped China to, its GDP to grow at a rapid pace. But as it developed, its income increased, and it reached this middle income status, and then its growth potential has decreased as a result. So instead of having another so-called technological breakthrough or innovation capacity breakthrough, China, this developing country, will have a hard time going from the so-called middle income to high income status. So if China wants to be like the United States, some countries in EU or Japan, it will have to experience that so-called innovation capacity growth. Otherwise, it will be stuck in this middle income trap. And there's some signs saying that the Chinese economy has already kind of strained and has grown out of that this path. So the path is no longer sustainable. So that's the so-called middle income trap, or something that some economists will come in and say, well, this is not surprise because China, the eventually it will meet encounter this stage, and therefore the economic stagnation. But I think there's also other explanations. Some of them are more political oriented. One is, has to do with China's economic system. And some political economists would describe China's political system as a state political economy as state capitalist system. After all, China, you know, the CCP has a strong control over the Chinese economy. Yes, China has experienced, rapid growth due to the market reform and opening. So, during the 1980s and 1990s, under Deng Xiaoping and its successors, China, opened its door to, foreign countries, invited FDI, foreign direct investments. It kind of adopted partial liberalization to its market economy. So that did happen. But, if you look at the history of that, China's economic development, you see that the state-owned enterprises, they never disappear. They remain an important player in the Chinese economy. And yes, during the 1990s, the CCP tried to privatize the SOEs. So there's a wave of privatization. But after 2000, we see that the CCP, focusing, or tuning up its focus on the state-owned enterprises. So SOEs, they kind of they're always there, and they continue to grow in strength and in influence, and that in turn kind of squeezed the private sector space. And in China, the private sector, even though the private sector is important because they contribute to the economic growth, and mostly they contribute to a lot of the jobs that are missing nowadays, and that explain the high unemployment. So private sector is important, and it used to be vibrant, but when it comes to comparing the private sector to the SOEs, the private sector in China, they never have an equal footing versus the SOEs. So in other words, I'm saying that the state-owned enterprises in China, they are privileged, because of their status, because of their relationship with the government. They get subsidies, they get funding, they get privileged policy, favorable policies. So the SOE, some of them became champions. They were quite successful, but most times, the nature of the SOEs are such that they tend to be overproductive, or they're not that profitable. So that's the nature of the SOE. So if you look at China's economic system, it remains state capitalist. That partially explain why we're seeing economic stagnation, because China's economy never fully liberalized. The state-owned enterprises, the party state remain influential, and they have become more and more influential. For example, the CCP is pushing for the establishment of the so-called grassroots party organizations in the enterprises, private enterprises. So we're not talking about the state-owned enterprises having those party organizations. We're talking about private enterprises being asked to have party organizations and party cadres in their companies. And those some of them are foreign-owned enterprises. So that says again something about the nature of the Chinese economic system. It's state capitalist, and the party state remains strong, has a lot of say over the market activities. So I think that also partially explains why we're seeing economic stagnation, because state-owned enterprises, they can be successful, but after all, they tend to be less productive and kind of wasteful. So that's one thing. And then the I will use the semiconductor industry as an example to illustrate that under the Chinese state capitalist system, we can see some success, but overall it can lead to this economic stagnation. So a little word about the semiconductor industry. Since Xi Jinping took office, the CCP has emphasized a lot on developing China's own semiconductor industry. They're very ambitious. I mean, as early as the upcoming of the Made in China 2025. So in 2015, the CCP came up with this Made in China 2025 initiative, and in that they already show their ambition to make China. They want to make China technologically semiconductor wise self-sufficient. So they declared this goal, that they want to achieve 70% of semiconductor self-sufficiency by 2025, something like that. And in order to achieve this goal, the CCP, the Chinese party state, invested a lot in helping, in trying to foster the semiconductor industry in China. So they had this so-called big fund, 大基金, big funds, and they came into two stages. These are a massive amount of investment, massive amount of money poured into the semiconductor industry and the related companies in China. However, the big funds, as massive as they were, they turned out to be kind of wasteful. They're not that successful. And in fact, in recent years, there are news about the semiconductor top executive from some semiconductor firms in China, and some officials. They were arrested and charged for corruption. So that is indication that when it comes to strategic industry, something that is definitely state capitalist, because the CCP would have a direction and oversight over these developments, these so-called strategic industries. So they try to foster the semiconductor industry in China, try to make it self-sufficient, but the ways they've done so led to a lot of waste and did not yield success. So I think that had to do with this state capitalist system and the ways the Chinese Communist Party allocated the resources. I mean, government, they as hard as they try, it is very difficult for government, non-experts, to really know what market needs, what market wants. So if you're a government and you try to kind of play the role of the business of the market players, then it usually ended up not successful, and it could contribute to economic stagnation. And that's I think the political economic explanation. When it comes to the political side of the explanation, I think it has to do with Xi Jinping and the CCP regime. The CCP regime nowadays has become such that it's really closed off. And Xi Jinping, ever since he came to office, he has been increasingly emphasizing security. I mean, we look at the 20-Party Congress report, the term security was mentioned so many times. And he linked security to almost every aspect of Chinese economy and society. So economic security, social security, technological security, everything has to do with the Chinese national security. So that reflects this mentality of Xi Jinping and the CCP, that they're so insecure about the regime. They're so worried about the regime survival that they talk a lot about, security. And because of that overemphasis on security, economic growth became secondary, because security was the top priority for the CCP now. They were willing to, I think they regret it now, but still, if you look at their priority, they focused on security and economic growth. They said, well, we no longer want rapid economic growth like used to be. We want so-called high quality growth. I mean, that's just saying that they recognize that it's difficult to return to the golden age, the reform and opening period, when you see this more than 10% GDP growth. They realize that it's very difficult for them to kind of return to that situation. And Xi Jinping, his policies decisions and his leadership style also led to this economic stagnation. If we look at the his insistence on zero COVID policy, I mean, zero COVID was kind of successful in the initial stage of the pandemic, but as the pandemic situation shifted, as the popular strain shifted to Omicron, that strategy was no longer that useful and that helpful. So Xi Jinping, nevertheless, he insisted on lockdowns, very strict measures, and that caused a lot of foreign investors to lose confidence in China, and even a lot of people in China began to become disillusioned with the CCP. They felt the lockdown experience was such that made people in China not really hopeful, and they felt the party has gone too much. So this insistence on zero COVID that reflects Xi Jinping's leadership style and how he made these policy decisions, and that in turn contributed to the economic stagnation. Last but not least, I mean, I think this is something we've heard of, that Xi Jinping or the CCP, even though nowadays they kept talking about private sector development is very important. We want to foster private sector economic growth, but I don't think the private sector has faith. It no longer has faith, confidence in the Chinese environment because of the experience that the CCP conducted very serious, very heavy crackdowns on the private sector industries such as housing, private tutoring, Alibaba, those high tech. These were used to be very vibrant and very influential, but the CCP under Xi Jinping, engaged this very top, very serious crackdown on those industries, and that definitely, stemmed the private sector growth and made the private sector players losing confidence in China. They felt, the investment climate in China is no longer predictable. There's a lot of unpredictability inside China. So the investors, the market players or the economic players, they even the consumers themselves no longer have confidence in the Chinese market. Next, please. So with that said, well, General Shankar correctly pointed out that we're seeing a lot of policy moves made by the CCP. So some examples include, excuse me, because we talked about the housing market, and the housing market is very important because it's really the engines of China's growth. A lot of local authorities, a lot of local governments, they relied on the real estate for their revenue, and because the real estate hasn't really improved, the situation hasn't improved. So we're seeing the Chinese government trying really hard to kind of revive the housing market. So some of the measures that they came up with or they proposed is things like preparing to cut the interest rates on the existing mortgages, So the largest banks in China are preparing to cut the interest rates on most 38.6 trillion yuan of the existing mortgages. Another proposal is that local governments could scrap a rule that disqualifies people who have ever had a mortgage, even if fully repaid from being considered the first time home buyer in major cities. So they're trying to come up with way to encourage people to buy, so they try to lower the qualification for the first home buyer. Also, there's a policy that would extend loan relief for the developers. So they want the developers to be able to kind of finish building the housings, because I mean nowadays there's a lot of unfinished housing in China. So a lot of the people who have made the deposits, who wanted to move into their new apartment, they found out the apartments are half built, not finished. So this measure was aiming at this, trying to encourage the developers to finish the building of the housing. And last but not least, the bank also proposed to lower the rates on existing mortgages. The second measure had to do with interest rate itself. So there's a proposal to have a 15 basis point cut on the interest rate. And then in the financial markets, we also see some measures like lower stamp duty on stock trades, escalated the defense of the Chinese yuan, try to make the Chinese yuan stronger. On the consumer goods side, there's also a proposal to increase the manufacturing of small consumer goods. Private business were also encouraged to increase their activity. So there's a proposal to crack down on government malpractices. Dealing with private business, pledge to boost credit to private companies and extend other funding measures to small firms, encouraging private firms to invest in key industries. So all in all, I think this shows that the Chinese government is trying really hard. They kind of try to mobilize different agencies, different government, different bureaucracies to come up with ways to encourage consumers, encourage housing market to revive, and to encourage private business to resume activities, encourage investments. But I think these measures, they will not be that successful, because the key is that the economic stagnation, it had its root in it's systematic, it's structural. So without really going to the root, which is, if you want to revive the economy, most people said that you should just uh, kind of let go of the control, let go of the regulations. Instead of cracking down on these private sectors, you should lift those restrictions, and instead of having a very harsh policy, or asking these private enterprises to accept party orientation, you should just remove those restrictions, and let the private sector, that the economy, that the market to do their things. Don't put too much regulations, don't put too much control on these. But right now, based on the measures that we've seen so far, we're not seeing the CCP letting go of its control, removing its control on the economy. We're seeing that they're still maintaining that very tight control, tight oversight over the economy. So those measures are just, scratching the surface. They won't really solve the problem, which is that, as I said, I think in China, the consumers, the investors, domestic investors or foreign investors, they don't have confidence in the market. They don't have confidence, I think more precisely, they don't have confidence in the CCP. They think that the CCP is going to be this unpredictable government. If they want to achieve some political objectives, they will, pass some policy, regardless of the impact on economic activity and performance. So from these investors or from these consumers' point of view, because the government is such way, that political priorities override economic priorities, then with in, if you can't really remove that doubt, that sense of doubt from the economic actors, then you can't really revive the economy. You can't really bring China out of that economic stagnation. Next, please. So this is my last slide, and I would like to give some of my views on the impacts of this economic stagnation. So I think that even though the CCP tried to come up with different policy measures to salvage the economy, I don't think, given the policies now, the economy will be revived in the near term. So what's the implication? I think there's going to be some implications. Domestically speaking, I think it will lead to rising domestic challenges. We talked about, the youth unemployment surpassing official stat is more than 20%. Reality may be more, much more. So, those kind of social economic challenges are there. And if the economic situation remains such way, it will get worse. And then we will see, because without having the economic growth as a tool to get people happy, then in order for the party to maintain control, maintain so-called regime stability, regime survival, we're likely to see the CCP relying more and more on repression and nationalism, ideology to maintain control, because they no longer have this economic growth as a way to buy people's consent, to buy people's permission, agreement to kind of be controlled by the CCP. So we're likely to see more repression and more nationalism. For example, lately the CCP has passed this anti-espionage law, which has huge impact because foreign investors, foreign business, researchers, scholars, journalists, people from outside, they will, after the passing of this law, people from outside would be very scared about visiting China, about doing business in China, or engaging in different kinds of activities with Chinese. And even the Chinese are affected by the anti-espionage law because they feel they were mobilized. There's a latest news story about the government authority encouraging the citizens in China to participate in this anti-espionage effort. They encourage people to call off each other, to kind of conduct surveillance on their neighbors or on other people to catch spies. So this would have a huge impact on Chinese society. Definitely will discourage investments. Definitely would discourage business activity inside China. And then another thing we're seeing is this rising trend of nationalism. A latest trend is about this draft law from the Public Security Bureau that prohibits comments, clothing, or symbols that hurt nations' feeling. This draft law has caused a lot of controversy, a lot of criticisms inside China. Ordinary Chinese netizens protested about this. They said this is arbitrary. What constitute hurting nations' feelings? What does that mean? It can be interpreted in different ways. Even the legal experts in China come out and say, this is crazy. This is something that it's very arbitrary. It will give the law enforcement bodies a lot of power to prosecute people. So, but I think the authorities in China released the draft law shows that in today's China, the CCP is feeling very insecure about their position, so they come up with very you say arbitrary policies or laws because they want to maintain control. So rising domestic challenges because of that. And as I mentioned, there's going to be more socioeconomic problems because economic stagnation will continue. And then, we're looking at young people. We're talking about youth unemployment, but I don't think we're going to see another so-called white paper movement in the near future, because in China, a lot of young people, they we call them the lost youth generation. A lot of them are kind of involuted. They're not happy. They're definitely not happy about their situation, about not able to find a job. But instead of going out to the street to protest, a lot of these Chinese young people decided to stay home and be the so-called full-time children of their parents. I mean, their parents can still afford, you know, um, giving them money or letting them stay, providing them food. So there are a lot of seeing a lot of full-time children in China right now, and a lot of these young people, they're frustrated, but they show this at the same time. They show this loss of aspiration and hope. So suicide rate in China is quite high, and it's probably going to increase in the near future. We're also seeing rising external challenges. Right now, I think this decoupling process is happening right now, and the expert Ian Johnston, in a comment that he wrote, he said China is building a Berlin Wall to forestall existential challenges, because I mean the mentality of the CCP is such that it feels so insecure about its surrounding, and it responded by kind of building up a wall. So those things that we see are, we don't comprehend them. They seem kind of paradoxical. The anti-espionage law, this nationalism going on, but it may be the attempts by the CCP to kind of fortress itself against outside challenges. And then Xi Jinping, lately Xi Jinping has kind of not showing up at important summits, BRICS, G20, and I think the latest news is that Xi Jinping is going to send Han Zheng to represent at the UN General Assembly meeting. So Xi Jinping is not showing up. So so that's something that says something about the CCP, right? They are kind of, at least from the outside, they are kind of enclosing the leadership in China is kind of, enclosing himself from the outside world. Maybe he no longer cares. Maybe he's too preoccupied with the troubles at home. So he just said, no, forget it. But it does say something about China relationship with the other countries. And I think when it comes to technology, we also, going back to my previous points, yes, China is trying really hard to achieve technological self-sufficiency despite U.S. Export controls. U.S. is passing a lot of export controls, trying to force China to kind of stay behind. But the Chinese response is that it tries to accelerate this self-sufficiency route. But I personally don't think it's going to succeed. But all these examples, I think, show that um, in in response to these rising external challenges, the CCP is kind of enclosing itself from the outside world. Yeah, that's my take.
Oh, that was very nicely put across, Christina. I must
Thank you.
compliment you for what you have put across. You put across a wide perspective of why China's economy is faltering. You covered ideology, which I think is fundamental because, uh, there's no case in history where a communist system has succeeded financially.
Yeah.
Take any country, right? China's success was in loosening up its communist control. It's loosening up it, or watering down its communist form of government, which Xi Jinping is reversing, and he's reversing to the extent, like you brought out, even putting communist people in private firms, which means even the private sector is being controlled by the state.
Yes.
Not only the state-owned enterprises, SOEs, even the smaller systems are the private sector. So as a result, you're only adding to the inefficiency, which you brought out very rightly. So that's a very bleak picture, which you stare at going ahead. Uh, yeah, there is an important aspect of demographics which you touched upon, but I think as we go along, the demographic is going to go worse. For the simple reason, the working class is reducing, the buying power is reducing, the older people don't have pension, right? And you're not
Yes.
replacing them with younger people. And older people without pension and a state support don't have buying capacity. So the switch from a manufacturing economy to a consumer economy is not going to happen in a hurry, and it's only going to worsen. So it's actually the picture is a little more bleak. Then the
Yeah.
issue which you brought out about geopolitical, I'm 100% in agreement with you. All China has achieved in the past, 4 to 5 years is increase geopolitical opponents within the world. And the latest thing which you brought out, which I think is marvelous. So China has now two walls, the Great Wall of China and the Berlin Wall, which has shifted to its, right? So it's going to contend with both these walls. And a critical thing which you brought out in my own view, which I think I'm sure many people today who are watching this will, understand it better. The issue of the national security law and anti-espionage law, where everyone is going to suspect each other, and when everyone suspects each other, there's no trust. If there's no trust, there's no business.
Yes.
I mean, you'll
Yes.
agree with me that business uh, goes by trust, and
Yeah.
economy is about people. You don't have people. Your demographics are changing. They don't trust each other. You don't have geopolitics. So where will business go? The structural issues are a later day story, and this is overridden by ideology which touches people. So that is a huge thing. And the last point, which I would like to add my own views on this, about Xi Jinping not showing up in the BRICS Economics Forum, not showing up for G20 altogether,
Yeah.
not going for the UN meet. He's sending, I think, one of his Politburo members. I don't recall the name. And the chances are that he might not go for many other events. My own guess is this is something which is connected with the fact that there's a major purge which is going on within China.
Mm.
And that major purge is started with Xinjiang being axed, and we don't know what's his future. He's the foreign minister of a state and a state councillor removed overnight. Then you have
Yes.
Li Shangfu, who's the defense minister. From
Yes.
29th of August, he's not been visible at all. Then you have the case of the three or four top PLRF rocket force generals
Yes.
who have been sacked, and they've been replaced by a naval person who probably does not have any, you know, uh, connection with the rocket forces, right? And then the deputy of the Central Military Commission, Zhang Yuhua, or whatever his name is, comes out and says that the quality of things which have to come in are not that great. So if you connect all the dots, I think there's a lot of internal problems. And the fact that, Xi Jinping showed up from BRICS, directly he dropped into Xinjiang, and from Xinjiang, it is rumored that he didn't fly. He just went by train. And
Mm.
he didn't fly. This is the rumor. We don't know whether it's right or not. The rumor is that he didn't fly. He didn't fly because he didn't want to end up like Prigozhin or, in an air crash. And if you go back in history, you know, General Lin Biao, who
Yes.
also died in an air crash, long
Yeah.
back. He had plotted against Mao and all that. So
Hmm.
China has a problem. China has a PLA problem, the way I look at it.
Yeah.
And if China, the Chinese politics and the PLA have a problem, there is an issue. And the way the leadership has been purged, and this purge is not only for the political leadership, even that's extended to the banking sector, the finance sector, and many other places. And plus the industry, like you rightly said, the private sector, Alibaba, Tencent, Meituan, the complete educational tech sector, it's all been purged 1 year back. So with this kind of a purge, I don't know whether they'll ever reverse back. I mean, this is my commentary on what you said. I think you hit the nail on the head. I just added on to it.
Thank you.
And the thing which I want to ask you, and I'll weigh in with my view a little later, is that do you think China will recover in the near future? And you said you don't see it happening. So what is the timeline you put on this future? You think it's 5 years, 6 years, 10 years?
Um.
And
Okay. I'm quite pessimistic about if I have to put a timeline on China's point of recovery. I think it's going to be very late if it were to recover, because I think this is something, it's going to be a vicious cycle, because I mean, the more insecure it feels, this regime feels, the more measures these very anti-economic business measures it will come up. So that is going to in turn lead to less and less trust, more and more worried within the Chinese public and outside. So outsiders would be so scared that or so discouraged from going to China, and people inside China, if they can run, they will run. If they can get out of the country, they will. For those who have no less capability to, they stay, and they become less and less hopeful. So I think in this kind of environment, it's going to be very very hard for economic for business to be revived.
right. The next thing is let me hazard a guess at the timelines, and you could comment on it. Uh, Structurally, China has been declining. I mean, Chinese economy has been declining for mainly two reasons. One is the structural part.
Yes.
Second is the ideological, political, demographic part. Now, the structural economy of more manufacturing and real estate and things like that, which is a little unnatural compared to any other international standard, has to restructure into a consumer-driven economy. That
Yeah.
is a And that itself, which has built over the past, say, 6 to 7 years, in my view, even everything else given normal, will take another 5 to 6 years to revive, to come to restructure purely from an economic point of view. Right.
Yeah.
Now, if you add the ideological problems, the demographic problems, and the technological problems, which you rightly said, I mean, if I might digress, Chinese technology has failed all over. There's no breakthrough technology they've brought out. I mean, if I may add, they've not even won a Nobel Prize in technology anywhere so far. If you,
Yes.
right. So add to this. This is only going to add to the structural problems, which have not started also. Right. So I don't see uh, China getting out of this stagnation. You call it stagnation, you call it slowdown, you call it deflation, you call it recession, at least for
Hmm.
the next 6 to 7 years. That's the minimum. That will take us to about 2030, right?
Yeah.
So if that be so, and after 2030, it can't recover because of its demographic and declining population. So we are going to contend with a China which is going to be stagnant or barely or recessing constantly or having economic issues. in which case they're going to be domestic problems. You agree with this theory?
I do. I actually do because I agree with you that I mean all these the factors that you mentioned, structural, ideological, political, technological. I mean these are they on each of their own is in itself very challenging, and you add them together because they relate to each other. They kind of connected to each other. So that lead to this challenge, almost difficult to be solved. We have to put a timeline, 2030. I agree. By 2030, I probably don't see much improvement, given what we observed now. And I also would like to add that you know I think it does have this political. I mean, it also comes to the CCP's intention. I mean, because after all, the CCP as a regime, it just wants to stay in power, and Xi Jinping, he would like to stay as long as he can. That's why he doesn't have a successor appointed. So so with that said, I think the in order to for economic growth to happen, for the economy to be revived, they really have to let go. They really have to stop exerting this much control on the economy. But I think they are kind of in this dilemma for the CCP. They can't do that. And you pointed out that this real estate growth, which was crucial for Chinese economic development, this is not healthy. It's something that it's not. It created a bubble, and so that is why they conduct this crackdown in the first place, kind of stop the bubble from popping and creating the financial meltdown. But for more healthy, for sustainable growth in China, that means the party will have to kind of change its strategy, and it all comes back to the party has to kind of stop having so much control in the market, and kind of let the market have more say, to kind of what is productive, what is really good for economy. But I don't think currently the party is willing to do that. So as long as the party wants to keep its hands so much into the market business activities, I don't think the economic stagnation problem will be solved soon.
Right. I think you made some great points. Actually, Christina, you actually spoken my mind. Really. I next week sometime I'm going to do a program on why Chinese economy will never recover. I did a program sometime back on the irrevocable decline of China.
Yes.
And I'm going to do one more on why Chinese economy will never recover hereafter going ahead. And we have to deal with the China which is not going to recover. That's the challenge,
Yes.
right? And there are a lot of people who feel that China might recover in X, Y, Z, and they expect the Chinese government to do something. I think you're pretty spot on to say that they'll not recover. And that's my view also. Look, everything can change, but people don't change. That's the fundamental thing. And if you see Xi Jinping's personality, he's never changed.
Oh yeah.
He's not, yeah, he's not changed, right? Okay, now I'll take some questions